I've been trying a new thumbnail style recently. Do you guys like it? I don't know, I really like it, but it also takes me forever to like make them. So we'll kind of see if it sticks. Anyway, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sophie, and I have a list or a shelf on Goodreads where I have all the books that I want to reread. Now, I actually removed a book from this list earlier this week, and so I thought to myself, I should make a video about the books that are left on this list because I'm a firm believer in rereads. I have so many books that I have never read before that I want to read, of course, but also if I know that I loved a book in the past and it's been a while since I read it, why would I deny myself the pleasure of going through that experience again and reading it again? You know what I'm saying? So I support rereads 100%, and I have a list on my computer of 10 books today that are on my Goodreads. Now, if you don't follow me on Goodreads or Storygraph, I have them both linked down below so you can always keep track of what I'm reading in current present time. But let's just go down the list from start to finish. Now, the first book on here is actually a recent ad, and that is The Hunger Games. Now, I love the series, of course. It's The Hunger Games. Like, who doesn't love the series? I read the series back in middle school, and I loved it then, and then I watched the movies at some point in my life, and I like those as well. I do think the books are probably better, but it's been a while since I've actually sat down and read The Hunger Games, like the original trilogy all the way through. And since the new book, Sunrise on the Reaping, I'm pretty sure it's called, it's coming out this year with Haymitch's story, it'd be a great idea to like reread the trilogy before that comes out. Now, is it gonna happen? Realistically, probably not, considering the next book comes out in like a mere couple of months, but it would be iconic to reread it for sure. And also, I think reading it with an older mind, you know, and being able to recognize not just like the plot and the romance and all that stuff that goes on in Hunger Games, but also the political underlining that Suzanne Collins always writes into her books, and specifically with the current political climate that we're in this country, it would be great to read The Hunger Games and just hear some validation. Let's just put it that way. But besides the point, Hunger Games would be a great trilogy to reread, so that is on my list. Next, I have Forever from the Shiver series. Now, I actually bought myself the Shiver series like a couple of months ago. I have it back at my dorm room. This is a series that I used to read again as a child, but I always, whenever I reread them, I reread like the first one and get partway through the second one, or I finish the second one. I never get to the third book, so for some reason I would like to reread the third book at some point. So I have Forever on here, which is the third book. When I put Hunger Games on the list, I meant like the entire series, the entire trilogy I would like to reread, but just starting out with book one. But in this case, I don't intend to read the entire trilogy again because I reread the Shiver trilogy like all the time, but I just intend to read book 3 in this case. In case you don't know, this series is about a girl who meets a werewolf and they fall in love. So it's very much like 2010s paranormal romance, not great writing at all, but like it's just a nostalgic thing for me, and I'd like to actually finish out this trilogy. Technically there is a book 4, but we don't talk about book 4, it doesn't exist in my mind, so I just want to read this one, okay? That's it. Next is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, I actually read this first trilogy again a couple years ago, and I remember really liking it at the time, but I never continued. And I also heard that Jennifer L. Armentrout has a separate series, like Flesh and Fire series. I think that they're like 2 interconnected series that you have to read in a certain order that like bounces back and forth from them. So I would like to reread Blood and Ash and that entire trilogy before I get into the like whole reading order from Jennifer. I remember thinking that the books were good, but I don't know if they were like good writing or if it was just like a fun time kind of thing. So I think that rereading that would solidify in my brain like where in that spectrum it actually falls. And then of course, like I said, she has like this whole world that she's building out, so maybe I will continue and like finish that whole thing. It seems like a challenge for sure, but I do remember that the books were very easy to fly through, at least the first couple. So we're starting out with Blood and Ash, but this is one of them again where I'm just putting the first book on this list, but I intend to like continue with the rest of the series at some point. But technically rereads would only be this book and then whatever books 2 and 3 are, which I forgot the names off the top of my head, but yeah, I'm over explaining. Blood and Ash is on the list, okay? And also, as I'm looking at this, all of these books I rated either 5 or 4 stars whenever I read them, because of course I'd only put a book that I want to reread on the list if I actually loved it. So just assume that everything that I'm telling you right now is either a 4 or 5 stars when I first read it, but also that could have been years ago rating, so I could edit that rating in the reread. We'll just have to see. The next thing on this list is Say You Swear by Megan Brandy. Now, this is a book that I was going to continue the series with, but I decided that I actually don't care to do so because I realized that the next book was about characters, like side characters that I didn't really remember or care about. But I do remember that this book was a long contemporary college romance. It starts out with a love triangle, but it gets rid of that very quickly and just kind of explore the romance between, I forgot her name, and the guy's name is Noah and he's a chef. I think her name is like Ava, or it's an A name for sure. Let me look it up. Let me do my research. Her name is not listed. Okay. Ari, her name is Ari. Okay, I was kind of close with Ava, a little bit. So Ari and Noah. I gave this book 5 stars when I first read it, but it's been a couple years, so I do want to reread and just kind of feel the feels again. I remember that I read this like during New Year's Eve, and like I was like sobbing in my room over the plot was at the end of this book while my parents were like calling me into the other room because the ball was dropping. So like it was an experience reading this book, and I think I would like to do another reread. Next is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. This is a very emotional book. I remember most of the plot of this actually, but once again, I like to reread and refresh myself. I gave this book 5 stars when I first read it. It was absolutely incredible. This is a book about domestic violence and domestic abuse, so definitely go into that knowing the trigger warnings. But this, I think her name is Indigo is the main character's name. Let's check that one as well. Iris. Her name is Iris. Maybe it's Iris. I'll say that. I obviously don't remember names that well, but I'm trying, okay? Anyway, this is a book about a girl who is married, or I think she is married, maybe it's her boyfriend, but she is in a very abusive relationship, and it's the process of her getting out of that, healing from that, meeting someone new. It is also a sports romance because the love interest is actually, I think, a basketball player, so this was really, really good. I actually continued to the second book in the series and didn't like it as much, but the first book is the only one I want to reread, and I know it's going to be very emotional for me like it was the first time, and I think Kennedy Ryan is always very good at putting really deep emotion into her books, but sometimes you really want something that's going to pull at your heartstrings, and this definitely will. On the opposite spectrum of that, Pretty Reckless by LJ Shen is on here for drama and mess alone. This book is a foster brother romance, I'm pretty sure. LJ Shen is not my favorite author in the entire world. I read Vicious by her, hated that book, but this one I thought was just a messy high school romance drama. Like this is just so messed up, and like they're just being so dramatic for no reason kind of book, but I'm gonna eat it up because it's a fun time. And so I want to reread this just because it was a fun time, and that's it. I don't remember anything like amazing writing. I don't remember a crazy plot. I don't remember I loved the characters, but I just remember that it was a goofy, funny, like these high school kids are getting themselves into some mess kind of book, and that's why I want to reread it. And I should be allowed to do that, okay? Don't judge me for wanting to have a good time, okay? So this is on my reread list. I have read book 2 in this series. I don't intend to reread that one anytime soon. I do have book 3 on my series I need to finish list, so I may pick that up at some point, but it's not really a priority for me at the minute. Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. This one I read and gave 5 stars, so I think I may have bopped it down to like a 4 or 4.5 star. I want to reread it, but I read it when it was indie published, and the traditional published version is out, and I've heard people say they've made a lot of changes that people don't like. So I am going to read the traditionally published version because for the rest of the series I want to be caught up to how she wrote it for that version. However, I am a little wary to go into it because I really had a great experience with it the first time I read it, and I think that hearing the bad reviews has made me paranoid just a little bit. Now I really should just be able to form my own opinion and not base my expectations on what other people think, but as always, you can't really do that 100%. So I'm gonna try my best to go into this with an open mind in my reread, but I do want to read the traditionally published version before the next couple books of the series come out, so that is on my list as well. The Predator by Runix. So as the time that you're watching this video, I think I've mentioned in the last reading vlog that I read The Emperor by Runix. I think I mentioned it briefly. I read book 3 in this series, basically, like last week, and I did not like it, so I do not intend to continue this mafia romance series, but I remember book 1 and 2 about one other couple being really, really good, and I gave both those like 4 stars, so I do want to reread those at some point, although maybe not anytime soon because I just read book 3. So I don't like kind of doing this in a backwards order because I read book 3 and then I'm gonna go reread books 1 and 2, but again, I don't intend to finish this series. I just want to remind myself of the really giddy and amazing dark romance feelings that I got with book 1 and 2. This is a dark romance that talks about like mafia and like the dark side of that, so watch your triggers with these, but I did really enjoy books 1 and 2. The Chestnut Springs series. Guys, this series, I used to call it the series that I gave every book 5 stars. In hindsight, I think I've taken 2 books down to 4.5 star books, but all that being said, they're still all incredible romances. Now, as a girl who grew up and now lives still in Texas, I think cowboys are a little overrated for sure, and I'm like tired of like the common narrative like, oh, you ride a horse to school like as a Texan kind of girl. So I'm never really like that into like cowboy romances, and knowing that these were that, I was just kind of hesitant going into the first book. But let me tell you, it wouldn't matter if they were cowboy romances, if they were fishermen, if they were businessmen, if they were whatever, it doesn't matter. The job itself is not the important part, it's the romance. Elsie Silver has a way of writing banter between characters that just absolutely, like, it's so enjoyable. It's such a good time. You can fly through all of these books. There, I wouldn't say like incredibly fast paced, but but I think they're just really easy to absorb because they're just such a fun time. There's a little bit of emotion in a couple of the books, especially books, I would say like 3, 4 are like the heavier ones in emotion, but book 1 follows a bull rider and one of his dad's, I think, employees who is like a PR person that is basically being hired to like babysit him or like come watch him because he is not media trained essentially. And so it's like I would say enemies to lovers. It's not really enemies to lovers, it's just a fun time. If you don't gel with the cowboy side of things, I understand the hesitation, trust me. I gave it to my friend, she said the same thing. She read it, she adored it, and I've been giving her the rest of the series for like birthday and Christmas gifts since. So trust me when I say this, you need to read these. They are amazing, they're so much fun, and I need to reread them ASAP. And the last book on here is probably the book that I want to reread maybe the most out of all of these books. It was a 5-star read when I first read it. I cried so many tears with this book. It is so beautiful, and I have recently gotten this book as a physical copy, so now I want to reread it and annotate it. And that book is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I read this book in 2023, absolutely obsessed over it. This is a book about 7 theater kids who go to this very prestigious, very private like theater boarding school, and the book is written with Shakespeare. So not only do the theater kids perform Shakespeare, but a lot of their dialogue in the book is actually written as Shakespeare lines, like they're using the words of the play to communicate their emotions and their dialogue to other people. Like, it's incredibly written. M.L. Rio is a genius. She really is. And the way that she wrote this book, it was so beautiful, it was so emotional. It's part murder mystery, part romance, part just growing up. You know, it's dark academia at its peak, and if the Shakespeare part of this like intimidates you, don't let it, because trust me, as a girl who hasn't read much Shakespeare either, this was an incredible time. So I need to read this again and annotate it so badly. It is on my very long and not set in stone concrete, but general TBR that I want to read in 2025 specifically. So please keep me accountable and make sure that I read this book before the year ends, or at least read it again, because she needs her moment in the sun again. So that is my list. Comment down below what books you want to reread, because I'd love to hear what you guys have loved in the past and want to experience again. Do subscribe as always, because I post every single Thursday, and I know a lot of you guys who watch my videos are not subscribed. Why not join us over here? We have a really good time. And in the meantime, watch this video here, which is my last reading vlog, where I found a 1-star read for the first book of the year. It was a little bit traumatizing, okay? But it was a fun time. So here's the vlog over here. Check it out, and I will see you next week.